came out here and there were birds all over this bird netting, trying to eat the grapes right through the bird netting. This is what I need. And although it looks like a vibrator, it is not. It's a refractometer. And the way it works is you put a drop of grape juice onto this slide here. You push that over and smash down the grape juice between this cover and the glass, and then you look through this viewer into bright light, and there's a little gauge in there that will tell you the Brix level of the grape juice. So that's the sugar content, and that's what we're looking for. So I'm just going to be going through the vineyard to the varieties that I know are almost ripe. I took a reading about 9 days ago, and I've kind of let it go a little bit too long to read again. And so I'm going to try to see what the sugar level of these grapes is now and whether they're ready to harvest. You can taste. You can somewhat taste the sugar levels by just eating a grape. They're pretty sugary and they're still pretty acidic. So I would guess between 20 and 22 Brix for these ones. So I'm going to start by just cleaning this off a little bit. So when I do this, I usually just take individual grapes and I squeeze them onto this plate to measure the Brix level, and I'll go to different clusters and different vines and just see what the sort of the average is, because some clusters might not get as much sun, they might have flowered a little bit later, they're not as sweet, and so you kind of want to get an estimate. Normally in a bigger vineyard where they'd have a lot of grapes, they'd just take clusters off of different vines and then they'd crush them all and then take that juice and measure it. Since I have limited numbers of grapes, I do it just with individual grapes, and I'll just go around and get a bunch of them and get the average. So this one says 24 Brix, which is pretty good. That's pretty sugary for a white grape and also for a white wine. For a white wine, I would usually harvest the grapes at about 22 Brix on average, and that one was 24. We can maybe grab another one here and see what that is. But if the average ends up being about 22, then we should be okay. See what this one ends up being. This one is 23. So then next I just record the Brix readings that I get in here for the variety, and then I'll estimate an average. And I sort of do this about once a week around the time that they're starting to get ripe, and that will give me a chance to get the range and estimate the range and when the grapes are ripe. Okay, so this variety here is called Edelweiss, and it's an American grape. I grow French-American hybrids here and then American grapes. That last one that we looked at, the St. Pepin, is a French-American hybrid, and this is an American. And the thing about American grapes is they don't get the sugar levels that the hybrids get or the French grapes do. And you're lucky if they'll get like 18 Brix. Usually they're somewhere between 15 and 18 Brix, whereas those ones, the St. Pepin that we were just looking at, I had a reading of 24 and 23 Brix. So we see what these ones are at. So those are at about between 19 and 20 Brix. So that's a pretty good sugar level. These ones are pretty much ready to harvest, and then what I'm going to do is, because I only have a few of this variety, I'm going to mix those white grapes with some of the other white grape varieties that I have more of, and then I'll just make a big blend. And I usually only make one kind of white wine. came out here kind of late because it's been so hot today, but now I'm kind of racing with the sun going down, trying to get this done quickly. So this is Frontenac, which was developed at the University of Minnesota. Super hardy variety. It's sort of spotty as far as its success here. It seems to do well in our crappy soil, but it's susceptible to too much humidity, like a wet season, and it gets bunch rot pretty easily. So, but this season it's doing really well, and that Brix is 26. That's pretty high, but 26 is pretty good, and usually I try to harvest and have the average be about 24.5 for this variety and the kind of wine that I would make. One of the things that I'm battling with time with these grapes is, like, I don't want to leave them hanging on the vines too long, because wasps and yellow jackets and all these other things come along and they just suck the juice right out of the grapes, and then I end up with nothing. And the longer they stay out here as well, the more the birds get to them. You can see that even these, though these varieties are underneath this bird netting, because this bird netting hugs the vines instead of hanging over them, they can just come in and sit on these, and these are all picked dry by birds. They'll just pick at them and they'll leave the skins behind. There's almost nothing left of these because of the birds. Some of the ones that are on the inside that they can't reach are doing better and fine, protected, but the ones that they can get to, they just completely devour. One of the difficulties that I've had in the past with my wines is that I end up having to harvest them too early. Some of those varieties, like the Foch, their clusters are so tight that we get a rain and all the grapes will split. In the last 2 seasons that's happened with that variety, which is why I'm getting rid of it, because I can't rely on that. I need looser clustered grapes, because they do better because they don't split in the rain. So those ones would split, and I'd have to harvest them way too early, and the acids were so high that I ended up with wines that just were not balanced and couldn't be corrected. So I'm trying to let the grapes hang as long as I can so that they can get super sweet. The acid levels will go down the longer you let them hang and the sweeter they get. And so then I'll have a better balanced wine to work with in the beginning, and I won't have to try to adjust and correct it throughout the winemaking process, which inevitably ends up failing. Now you might be wondering why I choose to grow a crop like grapes at Dancing Rabbit. Well, for one, it's a passion of mine, but there's also an ecological goal. A lot of people here drink alcohol. Some of them maybe too much alcohol. And almost all of it comes from far away and is made with fossil fuel, a lot of water, and questionably sustainable practices. Alcohol is also bulky and needs to be transported multiple times to get here. Most of it isn't organic either. Grapes are one of the few local fruits that produces enough sugar naturally to make a stable alcoholic beverage. And wine doesn't have to be distilled, as with hard liquor, and it doesn't have a wort that needs to be boiled down, as with beer. So there's no fossil fuel consumption, or there doesn't have to be. So only at 15. They're definitely starting to lose some quality, though. That one's at more like 19. We can't really grow the right kind of barley that produces the bulk of the sugars used to ferment beer here. We can grow sorghum, but sorghum doesn't make the best tasting alcoholic beverage.
although it can produce a delicious culinary syrup. But these grapes with the Brix of 26 can make a wine with about 13% alcohol. They are produced totally without chemical pesticides or fertilizers, and the only fossil fuel I consume is the diesel fuel in the tractor I use to mow about 3 times a season, which is about 1.5 gallons of fuel altogether. All the irrigation used in the vineyard came from this season's rainfall, even though it was a really dry year. This season I might get 250 bottles of wine or more from the vineyard, and that's before it's come into full production. I could hypothetically get 1,000 bottles or more in a good year once the vineyard is in full production. I suppose we could all give up alcohol as part of a more sustainable economy, but we don't necessarily have to if we can produce it locally and sustainably. I'm also not just harvesting alcohol from this vineyard, but hundreds of pounds of produce. And the more area I dedicate to vegetable produce, the less I have to mow. If I had sheep in here, I wouldn't have to mow at all, and I'd be producing even more food and goods from the vineyard. It is a lot of hard work, but I think it's worth it to have wine I know is local and sustainable. And despite my griping about the difficulties from time to time, it's worth it when I drink a glass of satisfying wine and feel the buzz of that natural local alcohol. Hey, give the video a like, share it on social media, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share Hardcore Sustainable with your friends.